everybody? Welcome back to Dude Ranch DIY. My name is Jake. If you couldn't tell from that intro, today we are going to be playing around with the Hud-Son Badger firewood processor again. If you've been following along with the channel or just watched the past couple videos, you saw me introduce this processor a couple weeks ago. And we were just trying it out, you know, as like any new piece of equipment, it takes time to get used to. We found some things we liked, we found some things we didn't like, we got constructive criticism and feedback in the comments section, and all of that kind of, you know, first experience, we're going to culminate and take into account here, and I'm going to be showing you let's say a second run at it. This time we have some wood that is a little bit more, let's say, favorable for what this machine is designed to do. Hud-Son actually sent out some new parts based on my feedback, based on some of your guys' feedback in the comment section. So I'll show you and go over those things on the machine. And we're gonna see how this machine does in a little bit more of an environment like it was actually designed for, rather than what Chris and I did the first time, which worked, although it wasn't as productive as ultimately it could have been. Now, I mentioned that Hud-Son had made some changes, alterations to this machine after I posted my video and got all sorts of great feedback from you guys in the comments section. The first biggest thing that they did was they changed up this grate. Now, this grate is basically identical to the old one. The only difference is these two bars and these two bars no longer come to a sharp V point here. And the reason for that being is that when you have a chain choker such as this, if we pull this out, you know, let's say this is on the log and you're winching up the piece, it used to get caught in this V here. And now, as you can see, it no longer gets caught. So that was one of the big changes, and something that, you know, we experienced the first time using it. The chain did get caught in there. I'd imagine that winch is a hell of a lot stronger than this metal, and it, you know, you could probably see that winch very easily ripping off this grate if it got a good enough hold on it. The second thing that we discussed was that these choker chains were kind of a pain in the butt to have to feed through every time to get the logs choked. And Hud-Son came up with this. They cut it out of their, you know, plasma cutter or, you know, water jet or whatever they used, and it's designed to just go on the end of the hook here, and this will grab the end of the log. Now, the other thing that we discussed was that they had a secondary, you know, choking sliding chain here to go on the front part of the log, and again, it was a pain in the butt to have to feed that chain all the way around and through the bell on the choker. I suggested they simply just put a chain hook here. That way you can just choke the log wherever you want. You don't have to pull the chain all the way through the bell, and that's what they did. So that's what we have right here. So those were the two or three, I guess I should say, you know, constructive criticism things that Hud-Son took into account after me posting that first video and your guys' feedback. So that's what we came up with. Now, as you can see here, we have some long, you know, pretty long logs here, which are ideal for this machine. We are going to be working downhill here, so I'm curious to see how it works doing downhill. I'm going to get the tractor out of the way. We're going to get the two IBC totes set up underneath the conveyor, and I'm going to get this whole thing set up, and we'll be making firewood here in no time. Okay, so now the Badger is all set up and ready to make firewood. Now, for the sake of simplicity, I know you guys are used to me filling up multiple totes at once, but because we're kind of traveling, we're not in the wood yard here, we're just gonna do one tote at a time here. You see, I brought out two, so we got this one tote situated right underneath and centered on the conveyor. It's looking real good. And basically, now we can fire up the machine and get going. Right, now, functions of this machine are pretty simple. It has an electric start down here, a choke, and this is your throttle. You can pull it out. This is your splitter ram, forward and reverse. The reverse has a detent, so it retracts on its own. This is your winch control, reverse and forward. You can go up here and just flip this lever to allow the cable to free spool, you know, out on the drum when you're going to, you know, hook up a log. This is your saw. Now your saw, you push down on this handle and it comes down. It is manual, but you push this toggle switch to turn the saw on. And you know, you push and hold it and you can see it returns back, kind of, to shut it off. You can raise and lower your wedge over here by moving, you know, this lever up and down. So we'll have to see, based on the size wood that we're gonna feed through this thing, you know, what height we want it. And then this is your conveyor. You have reverse and forward with a detent, you know, to hold it in place. And then you can also adjust your conveyor speed over here with this valve block. So pretty simple machine overall. Nothing too overcomplicated on it. Let's fire it up and get going. Okay guys, now this is what we got so far. A little bit, I'd say that's about a half a large IBC tote, maybe a little bit more. out of that one log, and that one log isn't completely finished. You know, you can still see we have the wood here, and we still have about, I'd say, 4 feet left to split of that log. But the thing with this machine is you need to start winching in another log behind that piece to continue to push that all the way through. Now, I was running into some issues with this. I don't know if you guys were able to hear me. I had the microphone on, but you might not have been able to hear me, so I might have just put music over it or something. But I was running into some issues with the feeding of that first log because it was a little cockeye. It was off at an angle, and it was getting caught on this mechanism right here, specifically this corner, because the log was coming off at an angle here. Now this mechanism is designed to put a little weight on the log to kind of keep it in place. I think as the saw comes down and cuts it, it definitely does its job, but this bracketry on either side, you know, if the log was coming in from this side, that one would have been in the way. In this case, or my case, this one was in the way. I think those should be raised up or pushed out more. That way, you know, it's just a smooth surface for nubs and stuff to not get caught on. There's knots, there's nubs, there's, you know, little stubs and stuff. It did do a pretty good job. Because I am working downhill, and because these logs are so long, I'm running into an issue where the saw isn't cutting the log at an angle. So this is what I was talking about, where the log isn't really matching up to the angle of the saw. Because it's so long and I'm on an uphill dragging the logs downhill, you'll see the log is straight, but the saw is at an angle. So it's then gonna cut the butt end of the piece at an angle and send it through the wedge on an angle. So although this machine is designed for long log lengths, it's almost like it'd be better if they were shorter, because you know, as soon as the log gets longer than this trough itself, it starts changing that angle, because the butt end is going to be out here and the tip of the log is going to be up there. It was causing the ram to push them into the wedge and then kick them out a little bit, which was creating pieces like this to get stuck in the wedge, which then creates this wedge adjustment thing to not do anything because the wedge is pinned in place. So while I understand why Hud-Son has this manual, you know, wedge lift, it might be nice to offer an option of a hydraulic wedge lift, because sometimes that little extra oomph of the hydraulic power can pop those pieces free easier than, you know, you can by hand. Like, to get this free, I'm going to need a mallet or to bang another piece up against it. But if this was hydraulically driven, I think I could just raise the wedge up and it would pop out no problem. You can see these black birch logs have very few knots on them, if, you know, any at all. There's like a couple little stubs where branches and stuff came out. I do think I'm gonna have to cut them a little bit short, just because I don't think the winch cable is gonna be able to pull them or reach all the way. Actually, what I might do is just hook up the end and get it up into the tray and then reset the winch cable. Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. and maple there. This is some nice stuff. It is definitely split larger than I normally would be splitting my pieces. Normally this piece would be, at least split in half again. There are, however, a lot of good size, pieces like this. That's well within, smaller than the palm of my hand. But that is, the downfall to any processor is that, once it goes through the splitting chamber, it's up the conveyor and off into a pile or into a tote or into the back of the truck. The one benefit to this particular processor is that there's no hood or safety mechanism or anything to stop you from reaching in over here or off the conveyor to grab the pieces and put them back in the chamber to split again or resplit, which you saw I was doing quite well. All right, guys, that is going to wrap it up. We got a tote and almost 2 large full totes here of firewood out of those 3 logs, 2 birch and 1 sugar maple, using the Hud-Son Badger firewood processor. I am not trying to sell anyone this machine. I get nothing out. If you go and buy one, that's great. That's up to you. So I simply got the opportunity to use this thing and basically demo it. And obviously the channel, we do a lot of firewood, so I thought it could be helpful for somebody to see that's in the market for a processor. There weren't too many, good videos out there using these things. Most of them were just set up on a tripod in one spot, and let it run for 25 minutes. Tried to get you a couple different camera angles so you could see how this thing really works and talk to you about it. That way, if you are considering buying one of these machines or a machine similar to it, you kind of know what to expect. There are so many different types of machines to do the same job based on what works best for you. This machine, I probably would not buy this machine just because it's not set up for the type of firewood that I do and the type of logs that I get. But that doesn't mean that there aren't people out there that it is extremely applicable to. So I think, again, this splitting session kind of solidified my thinking that for this machine to be productive, you need long wood. First and foremost, you need long logs. If they're small, uniform, straight pencil poles, even better. It will split through knots. We saw that. It has plenty of power to split through the knots, which I was impressed by for having such a small motor. I think it's only a 16 horsepower, like Vanguard motor on there, but it will split through the knots. But in order to be productive with it, you need that longer wood. Now, that's not to say that you can't split shorter logs. It's just going to take more, loading. It's going to take more choking of the logs and setting the winch and running the winch out and, all of that other stuff that you need to do in order to then split the wood. The point of this machine, I'll reiterate, is that you don't necessarily, quote unquote, need support equipment. You don't really need a chainsaw, although I would recommend it's probably good to have one in case you encounter a nub or a crotch or something like I did earlier today. You don't need a tractor or a skid steer, but again, it might help if you do get logs that are going in at a little bit of an angle like I had here today. But all of that just comes with getting to know the machine and getting accustomed to it and using it. Again, this is only my second time using it, so I have a lot to learn. I'm sure some of you that commented that you have these machines, probably, on a larger diameter log, you can't leave nubs. You have to cut everything, flush cut, all those old branch collars and stuff like that. That it probably helps to position the log dead nuts straight. That way it feeds onto the processor straight and makes it easier. You probably know it's, the maximum length log to get a straight cut on it based on that angle might be 25 feet and not 40 feet. You probably know it's better to not be splitting and dragging logs on a hill. But these are all things that I'm learning as I'm using it, and hopefully you guys appreciate you know, my mistakes, and you'll learn something from that. One other thing I wanted to mention before we wrap this up. So you guys know how much scrap I produce from the Eastonmade with that box wedge. Now, we just split up almost 2 full totes. Well, you know, let's just call it 2 full totes. And this, well, this is a piece of firewood. Granted, it's pretty big. We might want to split that again. But this is all the scrap that we produce with this thing. It produces very little scrap, guys. I mean, and that is because, again, it's going through a 6-way wedge, which isn't ripping and tearing and forcing the wood through to make those perfect square pieces. I would venture to bet that there is way less scrap in these totes, even though it doesn't have grizzly bars. I don't think for a machine like this, you really need grizzly bars. I think for a box wedge style machine, you 100% need grizzly bars just because of all that extra scrap. But if you look in here, that is all really clean, nice firewood, albeit might be a little bit big for my clientele. So guys, that's gonna wrap this one up. I hope you enjoyed. Again, this is the Hud-Son Badger. It was provided to me by Halcyon Forest Products out of Oxford, Connecticut. The owner over there is Mark. He's a really nice guy. I'll put all of his information down in the description below. Hud-Son has dealers nationwide. So if you're on the West Coast, they got dealers out there. If you're in the South, they got dealers down there. If you're up in, you know, way northern, you know, I don't know, North Dakota. I don't know if they have a dealer in North Dakota, but I'm sure they have one close enough where you could get yourself a Hud-Son Badger or any of their Hud-Son sawmills or other style firewood processors. If you like this video and you want to see me do more videos with Hud-Son, you know, Forest Products, go check out their website and let me know in the comments below what you would like to see me test. By the way, the hook worked really well. However, it did bend a little bit. I don't know if you could tell, but it's a little cockeye. So I think this thing might need to be beefed up a little bit, or like a gusset or something in there. But it did work very well. I'm actually surprised it didn't slip off a single time. So as always, guys, if you like the video, give it a big thumbs up. Click that subscribe button down below if you haven't done so already. Questions, comments, feedback, throw it down in that comment section. But for now, I'm Jake. This is Dude Ranch DIY. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you here next time.